So keeping on this world leaders kick we're on, I thought that this week we would do a video on inaugurations of the world. See, no matter what country you live in or what sort of political system you have, we humans are united by one common belief. You don't get to be a leader of a country until you take a magical oath. As a result, every single constitution in the world requires their leader to publicly take some sort of oath of office before he gets to become prime minister or president or whatever. The oath usually takes the form of some sort of promise to respect the constitution and obey the law. In theory, we do this because we think it is important for our leaders to formally be on the record caring about this sort of stuff. But of course, in practice, this spectacle of oath-taking, which is also known as an inauguration, has evolved into this kind of ritualistic thing. Turning an ordinary person into a world leader is a big transformation, so we like it to have a bit of razzle-dazzle. Now, every country's inauguration ceremony is a little bit different, but broadly speaking, they fall into one of two categories. Style 1 is the oath before Parliament or Congress. In this style of inauguration, the leader recites the oath of office before all of the assembled politicians of his country's legislature in a ceremony that is usually organized by the Speaker of the House. The leader usually stands at the front of the chamber and puts his hand on the Constitution, or the Bible, or both, and recites the oath of office until he turns into the president. This style of inauguration is used in Germany, and Israel, and Eastern Europe, and the Middle East, and most of Latin America. But inaugurations in Latin America also have this added gimmick known as the presidential sash. See, every country in Latin America has this special sash made of the colors of the country's flag that only the president gets to wear. And during a presidential inauguration, the big climax is when the old president takes off the sash and gives it to the new president. I think this is like where the whole cartoon stereotype of like mayors with sashes comes from.
Oh. For 3 seconds there, you were legally the mayor.
Yeah, and you was a girl, Joe!
Now, a similar sort of inauguration is when the leader takes the oath of office as administered by a judge in some sort of other big public setting. For example, the Russian president takes the oath in a big ballroom in the Kremlin as administered by the Chief Justice of the Russian Supreme Court, who apparently graduated from high school earlier that day. In Zimbabwe, their new president was inaugurated by a similarly flamboyantly dressed judge in a big outdoor soccer stadium. And of course, the US president is inaugurated on the steps of Congress, unless the weather is so crappy that they have to do it inside the White House, which is what happened with Reagan. This style of oath-taking is very popular in Africa and parts of Asia. So as we know from one of my previous award-winning videos, in a lot of countries, their government employs a guy called the head of state who doesn't really do anything except for the symbolic stuff. So inauguration style number 2 is when the head of state runs the ceremony. Usually how this works is that the head of state invites the new leader to like his palace or house or whatever, and they do the oath of office in a more sort of small, intimate setting without that many onlookers. In Spain, for instance, the new president comes to the palace of the Spanish king, who is their head of state, and does the oath of office in this small little room while the king stands off to the side. This is a very common style of inauguration used in Europe, in countries like Italy, and Greece, and Belgium. It is also popular in Commonwealth countries like Canada and Australia, and monarchical countries like Malaysia and Japan. Now, we humans believe that in order to take an oath seriously, you have to say it while holding up one of your hands like this, or touching a holy book, or ideally both at the same time, although that is very difficult to do if you also have to be reading this big long oath as you do it. This is why a lot of the time they just put the Bible on the table, or get someone else to hold it, or have someone else read the oath to you and you just repeat it back to them.
Execute the office of President to the United States faithfully.
That I will execute.
Faithfully the office of...
But, you know, it's also true that these days a lot of people are not very religious, so there has been a bit of phasing out of the Bibles in a lot of inauguration ceremonies. They got a new president of Spain just the other day, in fact, and his inauguration did not use the Bible. At one time, the Prime Minister of Greece was inaugurated by a whole team of Orthodox bishops, but they got rid of that recently too. In some countries, however, they have completely different traditions on how you take an oath. In Indonesia, for example, the judge holds the Quran over the president's shoulder as he reads the oath. At first, I thought maybe this was a Muslim thing, but no, it seems like it's just Indonesia. And then in Taiwan, their president gets inaugurated by giving a Nazi salute to a giant portrait of their country's founder. It's a little odd. And then there are in fact some countries where there is just no oath taking at all. In France, the new president just has to go to the presidential palace and listen to a judge give a long summary of the election he just won. Then he gets given this special necklace, which has been a symbol of French leadership since the time of Napoleon. No one actually wears it anymore though, because it started to look too dorky. And then there's Britain, where no one really knows exactly what happens. A lowly worm of a politician just enters Buckingham Palace, and in a few hours later she emerges as a beautiful prime ministerial butterfly. Since nothing that happens inside is filmed or photographed, it's all very mysterious. This is basically the climax of the ceremony as far as the TV news is concerned. But anyway, let me know in the comments below which type of oath-taking ceremony you like the best. Or maybe you have an idea on how we could make inaugurations a bit cooler. Frankly, most of them seem pretty boring, except for Tanzania. When you get sworn in as president of Tanzania, they give you a spear and a shield. That's a lot better than a necklace, if you ask me. Anyway, I will see you next week. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Canada, her heirs and successors. Her heirs and successors. Heirs and successors. So help me God.